Welcome to Pop Shelf, with seasonal and decor shopping and home essentials restocking. Find faves and needs
Good morning, and we want to welcome you all to our Domestic Violence Healthy Relationship Seminar. We want to let you know how much we appreciate your taking the time out on this Saturday morning, and we certainly hope that this will be an informative event for you. Before we get started, if you would bow with me, we would like to enter into a word of prayer. Father God, we come to you this morning because we are just so grateful that you are a good God. Thank you, God, for all of your many blessings. We're thankful, God, that you've given us this opportunity today to come and to discuss matters that are germane to our families and to our children and to our community at large. We're thankful for our speaker, and we do pray your blessings upon her. We pray your blessings upon each and every one of us, God, and help us to leave here to be better servants of you. It's in Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. I am just elated to be able to present our speaker today. She has a wealth of experience. Our speaker is Ms. Gabrielle Helix, who currently serves as the Alabama State Domestic Violence Prosecutor, which is a statutory position that trains prosecutors, law enforcement, and domestic violence shelters on the laws related to domestic violence, to be a liaison between the domestic violence shelters, prosecutors, and law enforcement, and to advocate for victims of domestic violence. Ms. Helix's educational experiences includes a Juris Doctorate degree from the Birmingham School of Law, where she graduated summa cum laude, and also the salutatorian of her class. She also has a BS and a BA degree in Management and Finance from the University of Alabama in Huntsville, Alabama. She currently has work experience as a sole practitioner, where she concentrated in the areas of criminal defense of domestic violence, sex crimes, child abuse, human trafficking, child pornography. Also, she served as a felony prosecutor for prosecuting family violence and sexual assaults. Ms. Helix also has experience as a freelance writer, a producer and media production and content creator. She's also served as a producer and journalist in television. Some of her civic involvements include being a member of the YMCA Board of Directors for the Lily Flag Recreation Association, Crimes Against Children Council, and the International Association of Women. Now, you see I have 3 pages of information on Ms. Helix. It would take me about 15 to 20 minutes to go through all of that. But let me just say this. I actually heard Ms. Helix speak to a group of us about a few months ago, and I was very impressed, not only with the content that she delivered, but her delivery was just as impressive. And when I've heard her speak, I thought that this would be a great opportunity for us to hear such a person. And so I'm glad to have her here. I'm elated that she has accepted our invitation. and she's joined by her husband, Mr. Bruce Helix, who's sitting there in the back. And I asked for his wings because the last time she spoke so highly of her husband. And that says a whole lot when you talk about a person who gets involved in domestic violence and so forth, right? So let's give Ms. Helix a great round of applause. Thank you so very much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that welcome. I appreciate all of you showing up on this beautiful Saturday morning. I hope that you all do get a chance to enjoy the day and not have to listen to someone like me all day long. Let me turn on my microphone. Does that help a little bit? Yes? Good. Usually when a judge asks a lawyer to speak, he tells us to be very brief. But I'm going to spend some time with you this morning. Thank you so much for welcoming me into this space. I feel very safe and very welcome, so I appreciate it. So let me give you just a bit of a preview of what I'm going to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about, and you told me I didn't have to point at the booth, but here I am. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about vulnerable victims. And vulnerable victims are those that maybe need a little help, that maybe need help from the likes of you all. And there may be someone in this room who has been a domestic violence victim, a victim of child abuse or sexual abuse. In fact, the statistics tell us that that is true. About 1 in 3 women have experienced domestic violence over their lifetimes. Now, with domestic violence, that can include sexual assault. It can also include child abuse. If a parent abuses a child, that's not only domestic violence, that's also child abuse. So we're going to talk about those things. I'm hoping to give you some insight into domestic violence and all of the other crimes and relationships, as well as give you some tips, give you some things to look for. Maybe something that you've seen in your neighbor and you're not quite sure how to approach, or should you approach. Give you some insight into how to keep your children safe, which we know our children are no longer only playing at the ball fields, like probably today many kids are. They're also playing online. And as a parent who has worked in this field for years, I have been less concerned about stranger danger than I am about families, relatives abusing my child. I am more concerned about that. I am more concerned about predators online than my child using the restroom in a Walmart. Statistics just tell us that 9 out of 10 children know their abuser. Kids know to scream when there is a stranger. We teach them that, but we may not teach them the other things they need to know, right? Body autonomy, being able to say, no, I don't want to sit on someone's lap. I've done it, so you're excused if you've done it. It's okay. But we're going to talk about that as well and how I think you can keep your children a little safer. The world is scary, and we don't want them to be scared of the world. But we need to empower them to be able to make decisions, and we need to be able to discuss some things with them. So yes, this is my contact information. I will tell you that I am available to really anyone, 24/7. If you have a question, if you want to talk to me about something, or if you need a resource from me, I am more than happy to take your phone call, talk with you. You can text me, tell me who you are, and if it's an emergency, because I will stop what I'm doing. If I'm busy, I'll call you right back. But you are welcome to do that. Email, text, you can call my office. You can call Judge, he'll find me. So we went through that already. So we're going to talk about what are these things, how do you recognize it, what can you do to prevent it, and how can you help your community at large. I saw this on Twitter the other day. Yes, I am on Twitter. I generally don't make a lot of comments. I just kind of use it as my news, right, what's happening in the world. And I saw this from this man named Jonathan Lewis Dent. He's a writer and assistant professor of the theater. And it really spoke to me. Imagine measuring success by the amount of safety people feel in your presence. And I thought it was powerful. It's how I feel right now. You all are making me feel safe. And to think that your mere presence, your being, may make someone else feel safe, safe enough to tell you something that is deep and dark, to me, that is success as a human, right? How many of you love your job? Okay, is there anyone here brave enough to say, I kind of don't like my job? Okay, so maybe not the one you currently have, okay? We'll just act like maybe not the one you have. Your boss may be here, right? How many of you have worked in a toxic environment, but you have not left your job? You don't have to say it out loud. I think we've all been there, right? All of those things like, I cannot leave this job until I have another, right? I cannot leave this job because I need health insurance. I cannot leave this job because I have children and mouths to feed, or parents to take care of, or spouses, right? And when you tell someone that, do people judge you? Or do they get it? I get it. My husband recently retired, and it's the first time that I felt like a greater sense of responsibility, right? He's always been the one that's taken care of us, put me through law school, our children through college, and now I am the breadwinner. I feel a sense of responsibility. I can't just walk out and quit like I've done so many other times before, right? And he's always been the stable one. Then why, when we are faced with stories of physical and sexual abuse, manipulation and gaslighting and coercion and intimidation within families, do we ask, why didn't they just leave? Why don't you just leave your toxic job? Why is it different? Why do we hold people to a different standard when they are trying to keep their family together, trying to get their children's needs met, trying to feed their children? Why do we ask women and men, well, why didn't you just leave that abusive relationship? Right? So think about it that way. With abusive relationships, you have a system of coercive control similar to prolonged attacks upon the freedom of movement, right? A freedom to make a choice to leave. A freedom maybe even to go to work or maybe go to dinner with friends. The freedom to go see your mom-in-law whenever you want to, or your own family whenever you want to. With abusive relationships, whether it is domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, it is not episodic. It is continuing. Because when I, as an abuser, am not hitting you, I am in control of you in some other way. And there are domestic violence relationships that never a fist is raised. I've had victims say things to me like, I cannot buy the amount of feminine hygiene products that I need. I am not allowed to buy certain foods for our children. I am not allowed to get more than X amount of gallons of gasoline a week because he monitors or she monitors the amount of miles that I drive. Okay? So the effects are cumulative rather than incident-specific. And the harm is better explained by these factors than by the severity of the event. There are victims who say, I can take one hit in the nose a month if I can get my children fed. And I'm not above not understanding that. I think any one of us who are parents would do darn near anything to make sure our children are fed. If I had to work the streets, I would do it to make sure my children were fed. We would probably all sacrifice a lot to make sure that our families were taken care of, right? So, stories of abusive violence that emotionally rock you and lead you to ask, why would anyone stay after that? If you remain focused on them, the victim, you remain unable to answer that question. Why are we not asking the abuser, why do you do what you do? Listen, as a prosecutor, one of the hurdles that I have in prosecuting these cases, whether it is alcohol-facilitated rapes, she shouldn't have been drinking so much. Whether it is domestic violence, why didn't she just leave? I've actually had a judge during what we call a preliminary hearing, the very basic hearing as we enter the criminal justice system, ask a victim in court, I just don't understand, ma'am, why didn't you just leave? So focusing on the gaslighting and all the things that the abuser is doing is what we as a community need to do. We need to say that is enough, and we are going to learn today, hopefully, how to step in. So domestic violence is physical abuse. That's generally how we think of it, but it is alone or in combination with sexual, economic, emotional abuse, stalking, other forms of coercive control by an intimate partner or a household member, and I'll explain that to you in a minute, what we think of it as criminally, how we think of it, in order to establish and maintain power and control. Just like a sexual assault is not about sexual gratification, I feel really weird talking about sex in a church, should I? God gave that to us too, right? Can I talk about that? Not in the assault form, but it is about power and control. It's about getting what you want when you want it without regard for any other person's feelings, right? So when we talk about domestic violence in a criminal situation, we are looking at current or former spouses, parents, step-parents, children who have in common with the defendant, a present household member, a person who has or had a dating relationship with the defendant. Now, when I say present household member, that excludes non-romantic, non-intimate partners. So I just refer to it as friends with benefits, right? We're not really dating, but we are intimate. And the reason why the law looks at it this way, and Judge, I'm going to use you, well, I probably shouldn't even use it. I feel so awkward in a church talking about this. Judge, I'm going to use you as an example. If we are living together and simply sharing rent, then we are not in a domestic relationship, okay? Now, two brothers, two roommates, things like that, not a domestic violence relationship, because here's why. My husband and I are in an intimate relationship. We have children, we're married. And Judge and I know each other just simply professionally, and really very little, don't really know each other very, very much at all. But let's say I'm walking by and I say to him, gosh, I've got my mortgage due next month. I think I'm going to be late. And he says, I got you. Okay? If I say it to the person that I'm sleeping with, my mortgage is due next month, and the person that I have shared intimacy with says, I've got you. Who am I going to actually go to for help? Am I going to go to Judge who in the hallway passed me and goes, I got you? No, I'm going to go to someone who has that higher level of trust and intimacy. Does that make sense? So that's why we don't include friends or roommates, things like that. It's if I have connected with you on an intimate level, there is a deeper sense of trust and dependency, in a positive way, dependency. And then when we talk about a dating relationship, we're talking about people who expect more from the relationship. And in the criminal realm, a defendant can say something like, oh, no, we weren't dating. But if the victim says, you know what, we went to the movies every Friday night, and then he would buy me dinner, and then he even opened the door for me, and, you know, kind of was talking about the elevation of that relationship as opposed to maybe a coworker, then we can still count that as a dating relationship, okay? So when we talk about domestic violence, we look at underlying crimes, and these are the different crimes that if someone commits this crime against a domestic violence partner, then it is a crime in the state of Alabama. So I won't go through all of those, but those are your underlying crimes. Harassment, it's an unwanted touching, harassing communications, calling someone repeatedly with not a good purpose, destroying property, intimidating a witness. Now that's one that sounds very technical, but happens all the time. When police show up at their door, many abusers are like, don't answer the door. Intimidating a witness is trying to keep someone out of a process they believe is going to happen. Not that there is a court process, but maybe saying, baby, I love you. Let's go get some counseling. Don't show up to that hearing. If you don't show up, they won't have a hearing. And if you do show up, I know where you live, right? That's intimidating a witness. And intimidating a witness to me is one of the easier ones because that is pretty much what domestic violence is. Because domestic violence and sexual assault and child abuse, all this occurs in the privacy of someone's home. It is designed to prevent outside interference. And that is the second problem. What goes on in this home stays in this home. Look, I am standing before folks in the deaf community, which is the most underreported community when it comes to these types of crimes. And I am standing in front of a lot of black women. And black women are killed at twice the rate than any other color of skin when it comes to domestic violence. And there's an author, he's a journalist, his name is Eric Shelton, and he writes for Mississippi Today. And he talks with a lot of domestic violence victims. And his articles are so poignant. He tells the stories. And he talks about historical trauma. He talks about distrust with police. He talks about all of that. If you have the opportunity to read his writings, I encourage you to read it. And I will send an article to Judge, and maybe perhaps you could get it out to everyone. It helped me understand a lot. So when we talk about these crimes, just for baselines, felonies are a year and a day, and misdemeanors are up to a year. We also have things like protection orders. So if you've been a victim of domestic violence or child abuse or even sexual assault, you can get a court order that does restrain that person from coming around you. But remember, it's just a piece of paper. Paper does not stop bullets. Okay. There is nothing in the law that says I have to make a police report. There is nothing in the law that says I have to. And there's nothing in the law that says I have to get a court order, a protection from abuse order. It seems to be, I'm sorry, I have hair in my eye. It seems to be in some jurisdictions they require one or the other. But under the law, you do not have to report to police if you don't want to. When we talk about these types of crimes, I like to refer to it like a quilt. When people used to make quilts the old-fashioned way, when quilts became tattered, they would just take the pieces of the fabric and sew them into the next quilt. And so we have what's called intergenerational violence. You grew up watching this. You grew up thinking it was normal. And then most of us are probably a little bit like our parents, whether we want to be or not. And that's the way things were always done in my house. So this way, this new house that I have created is the way I'm going to do things. I grew up, I do not want to say that I was in an abusive environment, but I grew up in a different family. And I did not know until I spent the night with a friend, and I was not allowed to do that until junior high. And I spent the night with a girlfriend, and her whole family sat down to dinner. And I asked, whose birthday is it? And they all did the same thing you all are doing, laughing. That was not something we did in my home. And so until I knew, I didn't know, right? So that's kind of what intergenerational violence does, is we don't know any different. Maybe we haven't educated ourselves. Maybe it's just been allowed. Maybe others have turned a blind eye. Understanding domestic violence and where it comes from, including sexual assault and child abuse, and I include all of that under this umbrella. When you look at the rules of marriage from the 15th century, it says here, one rule required husbands with errant wives to scold her sharply, bully, and terrify her. And if that doesn't work, take up a stick and beat her soundly, for it is better to punish the body and correct the soul than to damage the soul and spare the body. And this is, I pulled this information out of Davidson in an article written in 1977. So those were the rules of marriage way back then. Still looks the same, doesn't it? Just in a different form, right? Just in a different form. Now, in the 1500s, we had what's called the rule of thumb. It was not in our laws, but it was in what judges were ruling. And it was the rule of thumb. And early settlers in America based their laws on Old English common law. We brought some of their stuff over here with us. But the husband was allowed to whip his wife only with a switch no bigger than his thumb. If I were a marriage counselor back then, I'd just say, marry a man with little hands, right? So, this was okay. And if you grew up then, I'd still be doing it now. When we look at child abuse, let me go back. Mary Ellen Wilson is our first child abuse victim in 1874, New York. That case was brought about due to the animal abuse laws. We had animal abuse laws in place before we had child abuse laws. And the person who helped get Mary Ellen to safety was an animal abuse advocate. He was also a lawyer. But it took us 100 years before we had the National Children's Advocacy Center. Not that we didn't have child abuse laws, just until we kind of figured out how we really can help children. It took us 101 years. So we talk about these crimes. Somehow when we put the type of violence in front of it, it makes us treat it less. Assaults we hear about all the time, don't we, in the news? You know, a bar fight. We hear about that. That's in your police blotters. I know. It makes it treat it less deadly or less harmful than a random attack by a stranger. A random attack by a stranger is shocking, right? Why is domestic violence not shocking? And maybe it's because it's not shocking to us. We've become numb to it maybe in our families, that we just turn our heads. So one of the things that jurors do when they hear these cases is they try, and I hesitate to say they're victim blaming, but that's what they're doing. I don't think any individual jury ever wants to blame a victim. But here's how they think. When cases like this are so difficult to understand, they want to put space between them and the crime. So let's talk about alcohol-facilitated rape. So, girl goes into the bar. She drinks too much. She loses her capacity to consent. And we have her on video coming out of this bar. And maybe she's wearing like a tube top and a short skirt and some high heels. Jurors will say, if I don't drink, I won't become a victim. If I don't wear that outfit, then I won't become a victim. But I'm entitled to drink. That doesn't give anyone a license to rape me. Would that be a fair thing to say? Maybe getting help for me in another way would be better for us than to say, if you don't wear that tube top. For those of you that are really young, tube tops were really popular back in the 70s, okay? Am I showing my age a little bit? At the roller rink, right? Okay. So what jurors want to do, and I think what we do as humans because it's hard for us to believe that we treat each other this way. And so if we can somehow find a reason why this event happened, then maybe we won't become victims, right? So when we talk about domestic violence or sexual assault or child abuse, even child abuse, we say, well, what did she do? Was she out of control? Here's another one. She's crazy. You should see her. You should hear her. Crazy means what? Mental health. Defenses are she's bipolar. Bipolar is like having diabetes, right? Our brains are a part of our bodies. It's got to be healthy just like our blood sugar. But it assumes another reason. Is there something we don't know, some personal failing of this victim? And because we find a personal failing, that person thinks, I can't get out because I do have bipolar, or because I am an addict, I must somehow deserve this. And we all know in this room, nobody deserves that. Why don't they just leave? They don't leave because they are being abused. They don't leave the boyfriend who is repeatedly assaulting them because they are being abused. That's like asking a child, why don't you just leave your parents? So this provides a greater capacity to shed light on the abusive context as a whole is by saying they're not leaving because they can't. Now, and judges heard me say this. I have been married to the man that I refer to as the Pope, okay? He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't tell dirty jokes, he is not full of bravado, etc. I'm kind of the opposite, okay? And so, if I went home, though, after a long week of travel, which has been this week, and he is frustrated, right? There's so much to do around the house. And, you know, we have adult children, but those of you who have adult children, they still have needs, do they not? And, you know, the kids have been calling about this, that, and the other, et cetera. And maybe, you know, oh, we had taxes too, right? And he just gets upset, and he just pushes me against the kitchen cabinets. Maybe I get a little bruise right here. You think I'm going to leave? No. I can be completely honest with you and tell you I would not leave. What are my barriers to leaving? Is it money? No. I can get a hotel room. Is it because I have small children in the home? No. I have adult children. What is my barrier to leaving? I've been married for 34 years. I've been married to him longer as an adult than I ever was a child, right? That's one barrier to leaving. This is what I know, and I'm going to tell myself it's a one-off. And I think in that case it might be. But if he starts telling me, listen, I don't want you to travel so much. I don't like the fact that you go to dinner with coworkers all the time. I'd like to go to dinner with you. And then he says, you know that Amazon bill? You need to bring it down a bit. Now, I would agree. And I think he would too, right now. But when that insidious type of controlling, if he texted me 100 times a day, I would be calling him going, what is going on, right? I'm not accustomed to that. But our teenagers all think that means someone loves them. And I'm like, that's controlling. Who are you with? Where are you? When are you coming home? I told you this morning. Why are you still asking me at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? When it comes on slowly, many times, and if this were happening in my home, many times we don't even realize that it's happening. We start to normalize that type of behavior. An abuser is not comparable to a stranger who walks up to you and insults you or slaps you in the face, even if their apparent behavior in a particular moment is the same. The options available to you in that moment with that stranger are not the same available options to an abuse victim. The stranger doesn't know you, has no means to compel you to remain in the home, or to remain for yet another slap. It has little power to control your reaction. But in our familial relationships, it is very different. So let's look at domestic violence and the different types of what they're called power wheels. And when you have a power wheel, this is what I ask law enforcement officers, and I'm going to ask you all when you help someone report this, is to gather the whole story. So when we look at these wheels, I think of them as pie, so I'm going to call them slices of pie. I would want to be able to tell the victim, I'd like to be able to tell the victim the whole story. Do you see the isolation? Do you understand that this is emotional abuse? He's humiliating you. Do you understand that he's using maybe these traditional gender roles and perverting them into power and control? Do you understand that controlling you economically, right? So this is good for not only law enforcement, but it's also good when you are talking to someone who needs help, to get them to understand that this is a whole relationship, not one little hour of the day. We have different types of power and control wheels. Post-separation, that is the most dangerous time that a victim can leave their abuser, is post-separation. Their increase of fatality, of their death, increases, I want to say it's like 500%. Because, I know, I heard the what, because that abuser is losing control. So they are then becoming desperate. It takes an average of 7 attempts for a victim to leave. 7. So what happens in these cases is, and this is a very simple version, you have that explosion at the top. That's when something bad happens. And that's generally when our officers show up. So the explosion, but they immediately start heading into the honeymoon period. I'm sorry, it won't happen again. Don't tell them what happened. We can take care of this. Let's go to counseling. Let's take that cruise. I'll be nicer to your mother, whatever it may be. But then something sparks tension building. That could be the taxes that were due. That could be a job loss. That could even be pregnancy. Anything that starts to build tension and that abuser thinks they are losing even a tiny bit of control, then we head into an explosion. It's kind of like this. If you took a Diet Coke or whatever Coke bottle, and I said, you can have all of this soda that you want, but you have to shake it before you open it. Are you going to shake it like this, or are you going to shake it like this? You're going to shake it like this, right? That is a victim and their abuser. Victims know just enough, just how much to shake that abuser before they explode. In the same way we know not to shake a Coke can or a Coke bottle. So that tension building into the explosion, that victim generally can recognize when it's going to happen. So they will try to back off. And that's how those relationships kind of maintain. They ebb and flow like that. College age. So if you have college-age children, be aware that their power wheel looks a little bit differently. We add technology here, the use of technology, the use of social media, Facebook, here's my girlfriend, the use of taking photos and putting bodies on them or, horrible looking pictures that could ruin a reputation, right? College-aged and teens tend to engage in this behavior less than just old people like me, okay? Stalking also occurs in this age group. Stalking is a pattern of conduct where, let me give you an example. All of us has probably had to, either at work or in school, had a group project. So you were kind of paired with people you didn't know very well, and you had a purpose to be together. And let's say after that group project was finished, there's that one person that just keeps coming around, and you're like, group project's over. What's your purpose here? So that's kind of what stalking is. Stalking is being around a course of conduct for no legitimate purpose. Now, with stalking, I would tell you that if someone you believe is being stalked or unnecessarily concerned for their reputation, or maybe even bodily harm, is to immediately inform that person to stop the conduct. It's kind of a requirement in our lower level stalking, so I always advise everybody, whether it's through text or third party, whatever it is, whether it's through law enforcement, is to ask them to stop the conduct. And that way they kind of go, some people who were not out for ill may go, oh, I'm so sorry. But the ones that are will probably continue. So then we can call police. Or we can call police anyway. So with teens, we add things like peer pressure, threats. Those kinds of threats are like secrets exposed, emotional abuse, anger, using social status, bullying, things like that in teens. And then children living in violent homes, one of the big things that we see, or that's been my experience, is truancy. Truancy generally gives us our first clue. Something's not right at home. May not be as severe as this, but maybe somebody is struggling in the home, maybe whether it is just some recent job loss, something like that. But truancy is generally, for those that work in my area, kind of the first sign that something may be going on in the home that is affecting the child. School violence, pregnancy, pornography, sexual harassment, date rape, runaways, all of that. When we see those kinds of things happening in the home, we just almost assume the children are living in a violent home. At least it's enough for us to go in and go, okay, what's happening here? Now, domestic violence manifests itself differently in each culture based on the language and the values of the people. And I was talking today to the interpreters, talking about the deaf community. In the deaf community, it is the most, that community has the least amount of reporting of domestic violence. They are the most underreported community. It's culture, language access, access to resources. So if you tell someone who maybe is hearing impaired, why don't you go to the shelter? You think all those shelters have good folks like Ms. Cobb? You're not going to be able to communicate. Plus, the culture is a little different. So be aware of those more vulnerable communities that you live amongst, okay? And that could be sight impaired, hearing impaired, and language access, right? And I told you all about that. One of the greatest predictors of batterers is when someone justifies it, and that's whether it's sexual assault, child abuse, domestic violence, any of that. Justifies it, and peers who support the abusiveness. So I have a grown son. And I have heard in his age group, my son is now married, but I've heard in his age group, other, distant friends, right, say, you know what, she's your girlfriend, you tell her. We've all heard that before. It's your house. You tell her. You tell her who's in charge. So then when the insidiousness of domestic violence creeps in, you still have those same supporters. And that, it's almost like cheerleaders telling you what you're doing in those small increments is okay. And when you just take one more step, your friends are still around to tell you you're man of the house or you're woman of the house if you're the abuser. So when you have support from peers in doing the wrong thing, listen, we've all probably done the wrong thing once or twice, and we probably did it with a friend. And our friend was like, it's okay. We won't get in too much trouble. It's very similar. It's peer pressure is what it is. But it's adult peer pressure. The first thing you need to do when you see this in your communities or within your family is to A, be humble, show some grace, right? Let's not ask why you didn't leave. Know what you don't know. That's also a first step in learning, right? Know what you don't know and seek assistance. So know your local resources. You are in Jefferson County. You have one place here. You have a host of experts. You have legal experts. You have legal services here. There are a lot of resources. If there is a resource you don't have, you have my phone number, and I will find it for you. We will figure out a way. But do seek assistance. Just as a victim cannot get out usually on their own, remember it takes them 7 times to get out. People who are trying to help, it takes a community, right? What is it? It takes a village? Yeah, it takes a village to raise a family. And it takes a village to help a victim of these types of crimes. Because if I just get my jaw punched out here at the McDonald's, everybody's going to know it's wrong, right? But when it's happening in my home, and when others are scared, and maybe you're married to somebody really powerful, might get a little different. So seek assistance, somebody else can help. Always tell them the truth. Always tell victims the truth. It may be the first time someone was ever honest with them. Keep your word. Because the person they've been living with or dating is not honest. Hasn't kept their word. Hasn't told them the truth. So who do you think is going to be trusted? Even if the truth is not pleasant, tell them the truth. Offer support by actually supporting. Don't say, just call me if you need me. You call. You show up. And do not stop offering support, because it takes 7 times before a person can get out of a relationship. That's average. So you know it takes more, and some it may take less. 7 times. So that's 7 phone calls, 7 showing up in the driveways, okay? And hopefully you can get them to safety. So language access, and of course disability access. Resource accesses, so shelters, pets, things like that. You have Shelby Safe Pet nearby, so a lot of victims will not leave their abuser if they share a pet. Animal abuse, domestic violence, and child abuse, there is a direct link. If I know that I have an abusive partner, do you think I'm going to leave my babies with them? My animal babies? No. So Shelby Safe Pet will come and help with pet deposits. We'll come in and take the animal so that victim can find a shelter to stay, because most don't take pets. If you need that resource, you call me, and I will get you hooked up. And that's my phone number. Don't Google stuff and try to figure out the law. Call me, or I will get you with somebody, okay? Judge, Googling the law is not a good thing, is it? It is not. There's a lot of people with Google law degrees, and they are not licensed in this state, I guarantee you. Okay, so let's talk about child abuse in the realm of family violence, or stranger violence, really. Child abuse is the abuse of a child, a person, under the age of 18. Okay? And the person who does the abusing has to be someone who is the parent, step-parent, guardian. And I like to look at it just, you can have temporary control. So I just say anyone who has care, custody, and control over a child. So if you come into Walmart and you've got a little one in your basket and you see me standing there and I'm in this dress, I'm not in my normal jeans and a t-shirt, and you say, hey, listen, you look nice. I need to go grab some bananas. Can I just leave my baby right? How many of us have not wanted to haul a baby all over Walmart all day, right? So it'd be a little gift to forget the bananas and be away from your child for 2 seconds, right? But then I then proceed to hurt that child. I can still be charged with child abuse. So it doesn't have to be a parent, babysitter, teacher, right? So it's a responsible person who tortures, willfully abuses, cruelly beats, or otherwise willfully maltreats. It's a really easy statute to work because a lot of different things can fit in there. We all know that spanking in the state of Alabama is legal, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. So I'm going to show you some child abuse photographs. Now wait, before you all guess, they're going to only be of bruising. I'm not going to give you any faces, nothing that is too graphic, because I want to point out kind of for your purposes to be able to go, that doesn't look right. Now we have what's called mandatory reporters. Mandatory reporters can be healthcare providers and teachers, anyone that has a care for the child, ministers, things like that. But you can report child abuse as well. So, accidental bruising is unusual on the ears. Any of you have ever taken your children to the pediatrician for a sore throat and saw a doctor look at their ears? I remember thinking when it happened to me, I was like, we're not here for the ears. It's because that doctor was looking for child abuse. Soft parts of the cheek, the neck, the trunk, even on the butts, inner thighs, genitals, and hands and feet. So when you make a bruise on somebody, you're hitting a hard part. That's why we can spank on the fanny, because it's the fatty part. So when your hand hits my forearm here, the fatty part of my arm comes through my fingers. That's how you get that inverse print. And the less tissue between the hand or whatever the object is and the hard part of the body, the more likely you're going to have a bruise. So these are places that we look for non-accidental bruising. Okay. Notice, like on the it would be your right. It's kind of right under the buttocks there. Not necessarily on that fatty part. Of course, the stomach and lower back areas. So you have your accidental bruising and your abusive bruising. If you see bruising on especially non-mobile children like this, there is cause for concern. It certainly can be explainable. Absolutely. I'm not ever saying that it can't be. But these are what we would look for just as common citizens. Disabled children, especially those with emotional or psychological problems, learning difficulties, even ADHD, dyslexia, have been found to be at increased risk for abuse. Those children need special protecting. It's generally parents who maybe are uneducated or frustrated. So I always tell parents, do not spank out of anger. You're not doing any good. Now, I was not a spanker. I didn't spank my child, but that Pope up there, he did. But he didn't spank. What he did is he'd pop them on the fanny like if they ran into the street, right? His whole thing, because I didn't even want him to, and he was like, I'm going to do it for morals and safety. That's the only times, right? Get their attention, and they will remember this, okay? But generally, my experience as a prosecutor is when they have spanked out of anger, if the parents have some sort of mental health issue, maybe not educated, sometimes young parents, right? Lack of education in parenting in general, or lack of resources. It's a biggie. I equate lack of resources and lack of just, I need some help. So, when I see this as a prosecutor, I try really hard not to just immediately press the button on foster care and try to really get as many resources for that young family or that young mother or father. So, accidental bruises over bony prominences. That's what I told you about. Children less than 4 rarely sustain bruising on their hands. That is generally abuse. Abusive bruises on the head and neck and soft areas of the body are ones that we are concerned about but you remember that diagram, we're looking for those places. Of the children with abusive bruising to the head or neck, most frequently bruised site was the cheeks, followed by the eyes and this preorbital region here. When you are seeing that, it's probably time to kind of push the alarm to see if we need some intervention, okay? Accidental bruising, what do we all know when our kids start toddling around, right? This is the coffee table spot, right? This is where the coffee table likes to hit the head. We understand that. But you know, if you see that and others, it may not be accidental. So let's look at these photographs. So this is petechiae. These are the little blood vessels that burst, and you can also see here this rug. It's a rug burn. This young man's father I prosecuted, and he's got all kinds of bruising all around his body, but he was a star athlete, and he was able to hide this by saying, it's this sport, it's basketball, it's wrestling, it's baseball, it's football. So when coaches asked about it, they went, well, yeah, that probably happened. So I will just tell you this. Somebody with some power contacted me and asked me to really kind of rethink this case because his dad was somebody powerful. And I just responded by attaching all 54 photographs of this child's bruises. And guess what? I never heard back. Okay, so this one is a little girl whose mother was picked up for DUI, and her grandmother came over to take care of her. And when she started getting her undressed to go to the, change her clothes and get cleaned up so she could take her with, the little girl said, Mimi, you weren't supposed to see that. That's sign number 1. But as you can see here, do you see this yellowing? So we can't age bruises. We know when they're a little bit older, but we can't say this bruise is, 3 days old or a week old, because bruising happens according to our metabolism. So I don't have any muscles in my body whatsoever. So I metabolize like a slug, okay? So and I'm also accident prone. So if I bang my shin on the coffee table, it's going to be blue for days. And I'm also thin-skinned, too. So everything pops up. But if you metabolize quickly, then you may hit your shin on that coffee table, and it may start turning a little less purple. Now it's just kind of blue. Now it begins to turn, kind of that yellowy blue, and we turn yellow. And some people, that can happen in just a matter of days. So we can't age them. We just know if we're comparing bruises, which I'll show you here. This is yellow. And then do you see like this area that's a little bit darker than, say, like that area in the middle? We might be able to say if this was patterned, that these might be newer. Then we also see here, we see this mark here. There's another mark there. That's patterned injury. These are fingernails. But then we also want to make sure we are not looking at this and it can be something else. So for example, her little panty line right there, you can definitely see that's where that little mark is right there. And who amongst us women have not had our panties right up in that spot? Right? So we want to make sure we're distinguishing. But this is yellow. This one is newer. And so you can charge those differently. This little boy, you can see the pattern injuries. Now the problem is, with bruising, especially on darker skin, it's harder to see, right? So one of the things that I ask law enforcement officers to do, that anytime they suspect, or if they know a victim says it hurts right here and their skin is darker, especially you cannot see it, is we have special filters. And we can get those up to North Alabama. They can take a look at those pictures. And so if you say something like, my hand hurts right here, these special filters can look under the skin and see the blood pooling. And so that actually corroborates that may have happened. But it also lets us know that this will be a bruise here pretty soon. We most likely will be able to see it. And we can do that on any color of skin, but for people who have darker skin, it's important that we use that tool. So with this little boy, you can see the pattern injuries. Do you see that? And you see it here. So with this little pattern injury loops like that. And that is a cell phone cord. And so we want to make sure we collect that into evidence. Now, there's something else about this picture, and it's not about his injuries, that makes this a powerful photograph, is the size of this person's hand compared to that little body and this tiny little truck. Doesn't that make that image powerful? It lets you know how tiny he is. And that's important to me as a prosecutor, are good photographs, to be able to kind of express. I can tell you how old he is, but the fact that he has that little toy truck, do I need to? I mean, I do. But you know, you can feel it. This little boy is a victim of a parent who was frustrated because he was not toilet training as quickly as she wanted him to. And all these children are fine, well taken care of. They are happy. They are good little citizens, so I wanted to make sure I was able to update you all on that. They're all doing well. So common items, of course, are like the cords I said. Look at me pointing behind. Clothes hangers, belts, cooking utensils. I've heard of the wooden spoon. Is that still a thing, the wooden spoon? So these are the most common types of items that we see in child abuse. And like I said earlier, you know, parents with low self-esteem, maybe uneducated parents. When we talk about pathological characteristics, egocentric, distorted cognitive patterns, right? And then one of the most popular ones is interpreting a child's behavior as a personal attack. I heard this morning as we were driving in someone saying, I always tell my children when they go out that they're a reflection of me. That's a lot of pressure, I thought to myself as I heard that. So if I think that my children can cause me to have a bad reputation, I might fall into this, interpreting a child's behavior as a personal attack. I look at a child's behavior as a child's behavior, right? Manners, that's one thing. But not toilet training or making a mistake, who amongst us here has not, right? I would not think of it as a personal attack or some reflection on me as a parent. Now, I'm going to talk about sexual assault. I'm not going to be graphic. I know we got little ones in here as well. But that is the meaning when we look at sex crimes, what they involve. Okay? And we talked earlier about the gratification for either party, kind of in the sense of who is dating, right? Who thinks they are in a dating relationship. And the same goes for our sex crimes. So if I'm walking down the hallway quickly, and I'm swinging my arms, and I accidentally hit a man in his private parts, that's an accident. But if I do it for this reason, and I say, oh, but I thought he liked that, or I liked it, then we're into the sex crime area. So we very clearly distinguish accidents, right? 8 out of 10 of sexual assaults are by someone known to the victim. Very rarely are they stranger cases. Domestic violence, human trafficking, and sexual assaults involved. Can you see the overlaps there, even with child abuse? Because even sexual assault is about power and control. Human trafficking. I'm trafficking a human. I am saying that I own them. That is power and control. So if I can say it enough, I haven't said it enough. It is not about love. It is not about correcting a child. It is about controlling another human. And we are not supposed to do that ever. These crimes rarely involve strangers. Stranger danger for children is not a thing. It's the best way I could say it when I type that up. It's just not a thing. It happens. I don't want to tell you that the world is always safe, but it's generally someone that child knows. What I have seen is when a parent puts their trust in someone and tells the child to trust them as well, it's where we get into danger. One of the cases that I prosecuted was a member of a church, and this particular person drove a van who would go around the community and pick up kids for Wednesday night church. And of course, what does every good mother or dad say? When you get on that bus, you better behave. Listen to the bus driver, right? Get in, get off, put your seatbelt on, all of those instructions. And then during this time, do you all remember when schools went online fully and a lot of kids weren't coming home with textbooks anymore, right? Having to use the internet? And we've all paid that internet bill. Especially during this time, it was really high. Well, there was a group of 3 mothers, single moms, who on Wednesday night were working. And so they were getting off work as the bus was bringing them back from church. And that bus driver identified a need. That's important because that is what predators do, is they identify a need. And then they try to fill it, and now they have themselves a victim. And what he said to these women was, listen, I've already had him for a couple hours. Let me take him back to my house. You guys finish up work, and I have internet access. We can get their homework done. Remember what I told you earlier? I'd do anything for my children? And if I thought that would get their grades up and get my babies educated, and who do I trust? I trust this church member, right? He's been good to my kids thus far. And then he systematically sexually abused these children. And the children don't normally tell immediately. They're too scared to tell because what? Mama says trust. Mama says do what they say. And I know if I rock the boat, Mama's not going to be able to work because I've been down that road before, right? Don't you make me come down here. I came down here because you got in trouble at school. Girl, I've got a job to do, right? I mean, we've all said this to our kids. So when we, not teach our children the proper names of the parts of their body, we are doing them a disservice. If you can't name it, you can't protect it. If we are telling our children to use names for their intimate parts, like choo-choo, had a little girl that called these her headlights and this her garage, okay? But she knew what her elbow was and her chin, so what does that teach her? Shame, right? Shame. So when you have kids who can't name it, it gets us confused when we're trying to figure out what's happened. That's the first problem. But if you cannot name it, you cannot protect it. So, filling a need, or identifying a problem and filling the need. When we tell children, go sit on Uncle Tony's lap at Christmas, we haven't seen Uncle Tony for a year. He is a stranger to this family, especially to that child. Go kiss Uncle Tony. No, don't do that. Let them develop a relationship that's healthy. But that sets them up to do as my parents say in these types of situations. It's one thing to say, hey, listen, I need you to mind your manners at the dinner table. It's much different to use what we consider intimate parts, our lips, right? Sitting on someone's lap, that kind of thing, then not letting them know the names of their body parts and then telling them to trust a total stranger, really to them. That sets them up to not tell you what's happening with someone else that you've told them to trust, right? Who maybe is doing something similar, come sit on my lap, just like with Uncle Tony, and then I've been told to do what they say. Stranger danger, however, is different because mama or daddy doesn't know them, and I know that. But Uncle Tony, Auntie Jen, because women commit these crimes as well. Lots of them. So teach your children, tell your friends to talk about their body parts, to be honest with them, and to not be ashamed. Because when they are ashamed, they cannot and will not communicate with you about it because they feel guilty, okay? With my children, I will tell you, I used to come in from work and my son would be down. We had like a tri-level house. We kind of come in through like this lower level and just walk up a couple stairs to get to that main. And he'd have his friends over after school and he'd be like, Mother, please do not talk to us. We know our body parts. Like he was just like, all of his friends were like, oh, here comes your mother. And I was like, what are those called? I'm sure it sounded like I was a predator. But I was like, I would get home from these types of cases and just be like, I've got to get to my babies and make sure they understand. And my son is just like, we get it. Stop. So I was that parent. So let's just talk about what's true and what's not true. What time is it? I don't want to talk to you until 5. I mean, I would love to, but let's move along here. Okay. Let's talk about this. People who have been sexually assaulted will be hysterical and crying. Not true. I almost fell over on you. Okay. I'm heavy. What do we have? What makes us run from danger, right? What's the cortisol in our body, okay? And we do fight, flight, or freeze. Freeze, okay? Just in the same way our body tries to protect us from danger, our brains also say, however you react to whatever is traumatizing is okay. Whatever reaction is okay. Culturally, it can be different too, right? So, for example, in Malaysia, I had a friend, I used to live overseas, and I had a friend who had a friend from Malaysia. And she said every time that woman would tell her a story about like something bad that happened, she would be laughing. And she said it was such a disconnect for an American, right? But you don't have to be from Malaysia. Sometimes people have a nervous laughter. You see it on the witness stand a lot. You see kind of inappropriate, what we would deem inappropriate behaviors. But that's all because we're sort of Monday morning quarterbacking, right? I've never been on a witness stand. I have no idea how I will react. Maybe I will have inappropriate behaviors. But what we deem appropriate for us is not necessarily appropriate for another. It is normal to be your normal, okay? We don't think about men being victims of sexual assault, but they are. They just don't tell us. Why? Because men are big, strong, and brave, right? And this just doesn't happen to them. But I know it does. And it is difficult, especially those in like the LGBTQ community, to talk about it. And I guess for me, this is how I believe. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what you believe. I don't care your religion. It is not okay to hurt someone. And I have heard people say, well, this type of person has a mental illness, or this type of person believes in that. It's like, so is it okay to just beat people up because they have a mental illness? Like, I don't get it. Here's why I care, and here's why you should care. If we don't help those that have been attacked, if violence can't find a victim, violence will find a surrogate. If I can't wrap my hands around your neck, I will shoot the officer who arrives to help. I will hurt the people in the court system. and I will hurt a friend who tried to step in. So I don't care who the victim is, who they love, what their mental health status is, if they have an addiction. I don't care. Because my goal and what I do is to keep my community safe. Your goal should be to keep your community safe. So men, people of different sexual orientations, whatever they may be, it's important that we encourage that reporting. And lastly up here, last two things. It is not expensive to help victims of assault. Their services are free. And the last thing is, there is nothing we can do to prevent sexual violence. Yes, there is a lot we can do. One of the things, if you see someone, let's say you're out, and you see a total stranger out there, this is a bystander intervention tip. So can I pick on you? Not pick on you, okay. So I see her, and some boy or girl got his hand on the back of her neck squeezing, telling her she's just a dumb whatever. And I see that fear, I may just walk up to her and go, oh, I have not seen you in so long. Oh my goodness, right? Now, I've done that mistakenly because I actually did think I knew someone, and they were not a victim. They were just like, she's a little odd. But most people who are in danger will play along because you are the lifeline that has been given to them. Some people aren't that bold, but if you're bold enough in a public space, you're not calling out the abuser. You're giving that person a break to step aside and maybe break that tension, that change in thinking. You could maybe stop that explosion from happening. Now, it's not for everyone to do. And a lot of victims lie about being raped. That is a misnomer. Most people think that victims of sexual assault lie. But when we look at the statistics, only 2 to 8% of rapes are falsely reported. That is the same statistic for every other type of crime: burglary, theft, bank robbery. It's the same, because nobody wants to get on the stand and talk about their private parts in great detail. Does anyone here want to talk about their private parts? Tell me what it looks like, how it feels. Right. I didn't think so. Nobody wants to get up there and do that. Are there false reporting? Absolutely there are. But false reporting means that we have to investigate until we know that it is false. Not because we just don't understand how that happened or that someone drank too much. That does not negate that in any ways whatsoever. So we're going to talk about some of the things that you should be concerned about. Anyone, we talk about these assaults, we all understand what sex is, so I won't have to go through that. But any sexual contact, that can be touching something for some gratification that's very personal. Your lips, inner thighs, things like this. I often say this, women in the room, how many of you all have given a hug to, and men do it, it's men, they don't know any better, and they give you that long hug and they somehow touch right here? Do y'all know what I'm talking about? Okay, I see 2 heads nodding. That could be something that's personal, because we wear bras and that's always covered. So to us, that's our underwear. So it can vary person to person, culture to culture, right? So Muslim woman, would her wrists maybe be private? Her ankles? Yeah, those might be private, whereas apparently they are not on me, right? I'm showing them to you. We look at these by age, by force, or by incapacitation. So when these crimes are committed, we look at, was it by force, domination, control, physical force? Was it by incapacitation? Was somebody drunk under anesthesia? Did they not have the mental capability to consent? Or by age, under the age of 16. At 16, you can consent to have intimate relations. But under the age of 16, it is not only a crime, it's also it can be child abuse as well. So, but the defendant has to be 2 years older. High school students, freshman, senior, that's a crime. Now, I don't generally prosecute those because that's a good talking to, right? Usually the parents will be in going, we didn't know, because when we were in high school, that's what people did. Not everybody, but you know what I'm saying. People were getting married at that age for some parents. So we try to counsel, warn, etc. But we do look for the 2-year age difference. Okay, so 15-year-old, 16-year-old is not a crime. So please educate your children on this. Under 16, they cannot consent. Force is just use or threatened force, expressed or implied. It can be restraint, physical injury, even a threat of death. And consent can be communicated by words or actions, and a previous relationship or previous encounter doesn't count. You can't say, well, since I had intimate relations with you on Monday, I don't have to consent again on Wednesday. Oh, yes, I do. Just because you came around on Monday doesn't mean you get to come around every day of the week, right? Okay. So I'm going to give you a little video. It is not graphic at all. I hope that it makes you laugh. But I'm showing it to you because I know that many of you all are probably mentors. You work with the youth in your area. And this is a really good way to teach children about consent. I don't know. I haven't watched it in a while. Is it? We got volume? Let me go back.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you can make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware that they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important bit, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you're entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say, no thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind, and you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they are unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea, and they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea, and they said yes, but in the time it took you to boil the kettle or brew the tea and add the milk, they're now unconscious. You should just put the tea down, make sure the unconscious person is safe, and this is the important part again, don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they are safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it, going, but you wanted tea last week, or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat, going, but you wanted tea last night. If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you are able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea.
I'm going to take a break.
Yes. Why don't we take about a 10-minute break?
So we'll do that. Thank you. things that we see for those that are trying to control another person. Domestic violence abusers, so that's my umbrella term. They're generally controlling, duh, power and control, but they're charming, they're narcissistic. And that narcissistic personality is any way that they can behave so it can become all about them. Outgoing is not necessarily narcissistic, but they're people who maybe are those ones that shake hands and make promises because it's going to somehow benefit them, is kind of the personality we're looking for. They are jealous because they are basically at the core insecure. Okay? Then we have inconsistent. Now, inconsistency often exhibit mood swings, unpredictable. They may be smiling one time and change the next. It's not going to be huge mood swings that we generally see, but it's that tension building phase, right? Once you're in that tension building phase, that can turn on a dime. When you're in the honeymoon period phase, generally we hit a change in thinking. That change in thinking can be something like, hey, I'm not willing to give consent tonight, right? Could be any sort of adverseness to them. Everything's going great, we're having a great dinner, etc., and maybe I don't want to consent tonight. Maybe I'm tired. That could spark a change in thinking. Manipulative. Think of the gaslighting. What you're hearing is not what you're hearing. What you're seeing is not what you're seeing. Those kind of people. Threatening. They threaten their victims, but they also threaten harm to pets, children, even themselves. Not only is it, if I can't have you, no one will, right? No one can. If you leave me, I'm going to kill myself. And what does that do to a victim who probably doesn't have a whole lot of self-esteem? It's going to be my fault, right? It's my fault this happened. And that's the goal. That's the goal, is to get that victim to feel guilted into staying. They blame the victim. They may recite lines such as, if you did what I asked, I wouldn't have to hurt you. I wouldn't have done X, Y, and Z had you not done X, Y, and Z. Is that what happens at the bar between, like, after a pool game or darts or whatever? Usually people who go out and just strangers fighting, once the fight's over, it's over. But not in these types of relationships, right? Then we have things like attack self-esteem. Abusers want to make their victims feel reliant, so you hear comments like, you're not pretty enough, you weigh too much, right? I mean, if you're not with me, who would have you? I mean, really, right? They will make them feel worthless, ugly, stupid, unwanted, which then sends them into an area called learned helplessness. So baby elephants, when they train them to kind of stay around, they put a rope on their ankles and they tie them, to a post. And as they grow, they try to pull and get away. And eventually they don't have to tie it to a post anymore. They just know they can't get away. Kind of how we train dogs, right? This is the same thing. Victims will just then believe they can't get away because they're not smart enough, they're not worthy enough to even have the help and confidence of another person. And then isolation. Remember, this is a private, hidden crime. All of these are. We don't do this in public. We don't assault people in public, sexually assault people, commit child abuse in public, commit domestic violence in public. It is a hidden crime. It is all about keeping the victim quiet because any outside interference is unwanted. The minute the blue lights show up and they know that they are going to be separated, then that abuser is going to do everything to stop the victim from participating in the proceeding. And that just can include cutting them off financially, cutting them off in some other way. Friends, family, isolating them, talking bad about them. They're very, yes.
Can you go back to that? Because I think this is really on the isolation about
Yes.
isolating from friends, families, and coworkers. Can you just
Yep.
maybe spend a minute of talking about how that's done? Because that seems to be pretty prevalent.
Yes. So when we talk about, this is a hidden crime, right? We don't want, as abusers, they don't want a victim to even seek help. It is an isolated crime, or an isolation crime. Because what they want to do is they want to be the only one in that victim's ear. They don't want the wise mama coming in going, you don't deserve this. He or she is a piece of crap, right? That's not what they want. They want to be the only person that is able to get to them. They isolate them from their friends, because their friends may be talking about how bad this person is. They isolate them from the process. They isolate them from resources. If I don't have access to the bank account, I can't go to my girlfriend's house. If I don't have access to get money to put gas in the tank, I can't go to a shelter, right? And then if I believe that these resources maybe cost money or require help from someone else, I don't have anybody else there. So it's incumbent upon us to check in on those people. Look, I'm sure you all have like a service to check in on your elderly folks, right? Call it like shut-ins, right? People who are isolated from the community just because of maybe disability, age. These are the same types of people, just in a different circumstance. They are not disabled, but they are wounded, right? And even with folks that are disabled, we are able to make them able with the gift of things like this and walkers and wheelchairs, but we can't do that with our victims. So they're not reaching out. And I'm sure that you know folks who have been victims where they have shut themselves up, right? Just not really making contact with the outside world. It's probably not them. It's probably the abuser. But remember, they don't want to willingly. It's because they only can take one hit a month. They can't take 2 or 3 or 4. Does that make sense? So the rigid gender roles. Look, I am all for my husband doing the bills every month, okay? He wants to be head of the household, have at it. I am good with that. But if I want to write a check, I better be able to write a check. So there is a difference there, right? You know, I think he's got a truck. We kind of live in a rural area, and I think my name's on that truck. Because I think I bought it at work and then went down and had it all done while I could get to the courthouse. It's not my truck. It's his truck. Just because I have my name on it, it's his truck. That's his property. He rides in it. So gender roles, I'm not knocking. If someone says, I'm the man of the household and I'm going to work so you can stay home if you want to, that's the difference. If you want to, you have choices. So let's just do a generalization. Manipulative, entitled, they are disrespectful to the one that they love, and an attitude toward ownership. If I own something, what do I have? Power and control.
Can you talk about this ownership?
Uh-huh.
Questions. We'll take questions. Go.
Yes. Yes. I do want to talk about destruction of property. One of the things I tell law enforcement is when they get to the scene, to look at a victim's cell phone, even if they didn't use it to call. Because when I'm angry, am I going to destroy my own stuff or somebody else's? Right? And then I'm going to say, but I bought that cell phone, or I paid for that cell phone. That's mine. So one of the things I ask them to look at is generally when you drop a phone, you hit a corner, right, how it's weighted, and you get a crack through it. But many domestic violence victims' phones have a slam in the middle of it. Okay? So destruction of property is just showing kind of what I can do. It's mine. And it sends a subliminal message, right? So if I'm about power and control, if I own this, I can destroy it. And guess what? I own you too. I control you too. So highest officer fatality in 2017. Officers are on unfamiliar grounds. This is completely different than any other type of crime because they are completely at a disadvantage because they are 100% on defense. Remember when I said earlier, if violence cannot find its intended victim, it will find a surrogate. And anyone can be hurt in the wake. Likelihood of officer assaults. So, when someone calls 911 for help, it is good, if it is a domestic violence type call, to determine if the offender is unemployed, intoxicated, resides with the victim, recently has damaged property, a hostile demeanor upon arrival. If they know those factors, they should never respond alone. Because DV offenders will ambush them in their vehicles. Jimmy N., who was an officer out in California, he was responding by himself to a domestic violence case, and the offender came out shooting. And he shot Jimmy about 2 feet from his car as he went in to go help the victim. And that offender had shot his girlfriend, then shot the officer. And then as the officer went down, there was a child in the house, and he ran back, grabbed the child, and strangled the child there in the hallway. And then a bystander came out and shot the offender. I'm not asking you to do that kind of bystander intervention, but that is some bystander intervention right there. Homelessness, economic issues, alcohol and drug issues are all contributory. Violent tendencies, we don't always know that. We may take history, recent history, not old history necessarily, criminal history, job loss, that certainly is tension building. And criminal backgrounds that include, the violence. So, look, you may have been convicted of a violent crime back in 1981. That doesn't necessarily make you violent today. But I do take into consideration where we have previous domestic violence, previous power and control type crimes. That is something I really take seriously when I think about how I'm going to ask for sentencing in these issues. So, influencers of the bystander effect. Ambiguity. The more ambiguous the situation, the less likely people will intervene. Look, it's kind of like that see something, say something. You don't need to know all the details to recognize domestic violence. Group cohesiveness. The need to behave in correct and socially acceptable ways. Thus, when observers fail to react, other individuals then take the cues from you. So if you're like, you know what, I don't think it's a big deal, and I'm on the fence, I'm probably going to use you as my leader and go, I don't think it's a big deal either. Bystanders who intervene and try to seek resources think for themselves. Diffusion of responsibility. This can be an obstacle for people who realize that there is a need to intervene. Any of you all take CPR? What's one of the things you learn? What's one of the things you learn to be like, you call 911, right? You're supposed to designate, because if you just yell, call 911, nobody does. Because they think the other person's going to do it. This is exactly the same here. If someone doesn't step up and be the leader, then no one will. Okay? So let's not think about it as not my problem. Let's not say it's up to her if she wants to leave. Let's not say if it's in the home, it stays in the home anymore. Let's not say it's her fault. And let's never say it can't be that bad. Okay. So, how could you let this happen? Why didn't you say anything? How could I or we let this happen in our community? This is what we need to be saying. How can I or we learn to say something? Work in teams. Get groups together. Have these dialogues about what we will and will not accept in our communities. Shift responsibility from the victim to the family, to the friends, to the community. It is not only public health, it is public safety. And then it's community health and community safety. If your communities are not healthy, they cannot thrive. Is that a fair statement? So, change our social norms when we look at this stuff. It is the responsibility of the community. It's a collective responsibility. So remember Mothers Against Drunk Driving way long ago? I can remember before they even had the group. It wasn't, why are people drinking and driving? It was, as mothers, we are going to do something about it. We didn't put the onus on those that were drinking. We were like, we will change the laws. We will change how we do things around here. Because if you won't stop drinking and driving, we are going to do something about it. So think of this charge against these types of crimes similarly to friends don't let friends drive drunk, right? Friends don't let friends drink and drive. Friends don't let friends hurt others. Spouses don't let spouses hurt spouses. Boyfriends, girlfriends, young people, okay? So, I will take responsibility for prosecuting these things and pointing it out and providing you resources. All you have to take responsibility for doing is calling me and asking for help, and I will help you, okay? Let's talk here at the end about your children and the dangers of the internet. Although the internet is wonderful, there is a dark side. All of you on Facebook? I love that answer. So my son teaches this, and he is 27. He runs public relations. He does marketing, that kind of thing. And he is not on social media. In fact, he calls it a hellscape. He's like, it is the worst thing ever. He goes, there's no way I will let my children be on that. And I'm thinking, sure, you won't. He's like, I'm not kidding. He hates it. But he knows everything about it, and so I have to give him credit because he developed these for me to be able to use. So Facebook, right, social networking, get on. Generally now it's older people, not so much young people. It's kind of like when the young people were on it and then their parents were on it, they were like, we're done, out. We're going to jump onto something else, okay? But you've got your groups and your shared interests. Instagram, those are short little stories, photos, that kind of thing. Now, I will tell you, this is how stupid I am. If we have time, I have a cat who is just a plain orange, goofy-looking, kind of almost adult cat. And he is an Instagram influencer by accident. And I started just posting little things about him, and the next thing you know, I wake up in the middle of the night, and I've got, like, this has got 100,000 views. I'm like, what? So my son, when he got out of school, or while he was still in college working on his marketing degree, he made his cat an Instagram star. Even got a Chewy, right? Pet Depot sponsorships and all this kind of stuff. And the minute he did it, he just shut it down and said, I showed you, it's easy to do. I was like, really? Like, I want to do that now. And he's like, no, Mother, because you know what you did? When you posted that last picture, his name is Levon, my cat. When you post that last picture of Levon, you know that it's geotagged and it shows me exactly where you live. How did I do that? And he said, well, Mother, if you knew what you were doing safely, you would know. So he has to come and clean it up for me. I had no idea. Your children don't know. I don't know. Your children don't. Maybe they do, but your young ones certainly don't. So apparently on 3 posts of Levon, I could just send people right to my home. That's pretty scary. Twitter. Microblogging, short little messages, news of the day, what's trending. That all depends on however you use it. YouTube, you can go on and watch videos, right? Familiar with that? You can also comment and engage. Any type of social media account where you can comment and engage is dangerous for children. Children can't differentiate what's good and bad on the internet, and nor does the internet tell them, this is not another child who's 11. This is some 40-year-old doughy guy sitting in his basement pretending to be a child, right? And children don't get that kind of danger. I said doughy guy, didn't I? Y'all know exactly that whole image, right? That's terrible, but that's what I did. Okay, Snapchat. I never understood Snapchat, but apparently Snapchat, there's probably tons of people in here who are like, really? But you can post something and it disappears. They are the bane of law enforcement's existence because we can't sometimes pull that information. That's what's dangerous here. We get kids sending like nude pictures of themselves, right? But it disappears. So parents can't go back and look at it. Snapchat would not be something I would want my child on. Twitch, which is a live streaming, meaning it's live, but you can converse with these people. It's like watching your local news, but you can just talk to your anchors while they're talking to you, okay? Also includes other forms of content like music, creative content, talk shows. Again, no one on the other side of the screen ever has to say how old they are, who they are, and sexual predators have a right to be on social media, okay? Discord. Discord is a messaging and voice app that primarily focuses on building communities around shared interests. Could a whole section of my parents are so mean and strict be something that you can discuss here on a shared community or interest? Yes. And what did I tell you earlier that predators do? They identify the need and they fill it. It's one of the most popular ways that sexual predators groom children. I understand. Your parents seem strict, but listen, I get it. You can talk to me about it. I'll buy you those dangly earrings your mother won't buy you, right? So they're filling that need. And then the victim says, I feel heard. This person thinks I'm important. My parents don't think I'm important. Listen, I don't know. I think everybody at any age in this room will say at some point in time, our parents didn't get us, right? We felt awkward at one point. Our parents loved us, but they maybe not understood us. And when you are in that time of life, when someone says, I hear you, I understand, and I love you just the way you are, that is dangerous when it's not coming from someone they should trust. Reddit. That is like social news discussion sites that allows users to post and vote on content. Again, this also creates communities. Any sort of private group, a community, join and nobody else can see on the inside of what's going on with that group is very dangerous for children and young people. Other social media things are like Yik Yak, Marco Polo. Kik is bad. Kik is one of the big apps that comes across when we have NCMEC. NCMEC is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And what happens when they see child sexual abuse material is they will see it, flag it, they will find the IP address from which it came, and then they will notify the jurisdiction. So it came from, Green Springs area here in Jefferson County, the street, and then we will get a search warrant and then go to that house and see if we can pull that material and find out where it's coming from and ensure that everyone's safe. Kik is one of those that seems to have had a ton of child cases and human trafficking. So one of the things, you may not understand all of these, but if you see any of these icons on your children's phones, you need to be asking questions and probably deleting. And the young people here are like, please don't tell them that. Okay, so there are apps that hide things from you as parents. This is a calculator app. It looks just like the app on your iPhone. You cannot tell a difference. And behind that screen, so if I'm going to act like I'm adding, I'm really giving it a passcode. And those could be dirty pictures. Those can be conversations. I can hide stuff behind it, but it looks exactly like the app on your phone. You would never recognize it. So these are all hide from my parents types apps. You see these on your child's phone. I'd probably take the phone away and then investigate, okay? Then you have app locks. So it locks the apps that your children have. They have a passcode to that. So even if you tried to get into their apps, you would not be able to. You can take some of these and hide. Let's say that Kick that I told you about. Let's say they know you came today and you know about Kick. They can take this app lock and hide that Kick app behind it. Okay, so remember, if it's in your house, you should know about it. And that includes the apps that are in your house as well. Second phone number. These are burner numbers. So I can set up, I can go through even Google and get burner numbers. I know a prosecutor who gives out a different Google number for each case to his victims, so he knows who's calling when they call, and then after the case is over, he will give them a main number and then take away that immediate access phone number. I have victims, I've had my cell phone number since cell phones came into existence, so I've had victims that have called me for years, old clients. I don't want to get rid of my number, but this is a way to do it. This is another way for people to communicate illicitly, and you will never know. Notice here, when they rate apps, they tell you like what's its ranking, how popular it is. This is about, I guess, maybe about a month ago. This was number 54 out of millions of apps online. So this is a very popular thing. People who have affairs use burner numbers. Not anyone in here, I know that. Video games. So I really listened to my son about this because he did play some of these games. He said that the games themselves are not bad. It is the fact that they can be played with people that you don't know. He said, you know, sure, some of them are violent, some of them are odd, but like Among Us, I've played online with my family, but you can invite strangers to play. And then what happens, once you're in one of those games, those strangers can then private message or start chats with other players. And that's when they are, how old are you? Oh, I know I'm 40. I'm 13 too. What are your parents like, right? This is a discussion that children who maybe spend a lot of time online, maybe they might be shy or awkward. It's much easier to communicate without being face-to-face. The problem is predators know this. I think they know it better than parents sometimes. Catfishing, pretending to be someone online in order to lure, befriend, date, or have contact with someone. Made a movie about it. Cyber flashing, that's sending unwanted naked pictures to someone, unrequested pictures. Deep fakes, we're not even able to charge criminally for this. In fact, there is a case right now where a student has taken pictures of, I'll just say for lack of a better word, the popular girls. He feels like an outsider. He's taken pictures of the popular girls and then put very illicit pictures of people in bad positions with their faces. The problem is their faces are not a private image. They were on Instagram. We generally look for private images, right? Stuff that maybe my husband in boudoir pictures, right? And then later we get divorced and he's like, I'm going to release these pictures if you don't give me the kids. We do have a crime for that. But this deep fake where somebody looks like it's really them, maybe it's their face, but their body's doing something that you don't want to see. We don't even have a crime for that yet. We can't keep up in the legislature to try to figure out how to do that. This is used in high school to intimidate, embarrass, right, kids. Please report it. Zoom bombing. Everybody been on Zoom during COVID, right? Zoom bombing is when people can get into your Zoom calls. Did anyone have that happen here? Yeah. So it's just sort of like hacking. Doxing. Doxing is revealing the name or identity or location of somebody. And what it does is it gives these intimate details and even where someone lives to the public or to someone else, a harasser or an abuser. Revenge porn. So what we call that is malicious taking of intimate photos or videos, camera in the bathroom, or maybe even those private videos or photos that I talked about earlier, and then saying, if you don't, I will slander, hurt your reputation, whatever. And that's what that's called. And then sextortion refers to threatening or exposing images or videos of someone against their will as a form of blackmail to control, often used for sexual, personal, financial gain. Now, these are little shortcuts that teenagers use. Welcome to Take Pictures. I'm going to leave my PowerPoint with you. CD9 or Code 9, parents are around. DNI, do not interact, especially as a warning for children under 18. DPW, y'all know what that stands for. Pictures welcome. Using private message, DM me, or let's talk about this down in the DM. GNRN, get naked now, get naked right now, get naked on camera, let's meet in real life. Like my pic, that's sending someone to like a picture. And then these little things like naked in front of a computer, this NIFOC means if someone types that in, that is a request for you to get naked in front of a computer. The most bothersome thing about this stuff is so many kids don't know who's behind the screen. And there's been this has happened many times, but I remember listening to these parents recently. It's about 6 months ago. Their son thought he was talking to a young girl. They stay up all night talking. They start to exchange pictures. He's a high school boy, okay? And we know those brains aren't very mature. And the minute that he did, the person on the other end said, if you don't send me $500 now, we're going to show these to your parents. He paid them. He sent them through PayPal the money. By 6 a.m., his entire PayPal account was deleted, and he had killed himself. And these parents said, I don't know that we told him enough that there is nothing you can do for us not to love you. There is nothing you can do that cannot be fixed. And to hear the anguish of that mother's voice about saying, I didn't tell him enough, that there's nothing you can do. You can't tell us about. But that little boy became desperate. These types of cases are happening across the U.S. and I'm sure across the world. Parent alert, or PIR, parent in room. That means let's stop talking because my mom walked in, right? Rule 34, any topic can be made into pornographic content, meaning, we're going to go ahead and go there on these chats. Snack or snack. Sneaky link, seeing someone for sex, but you want to keep the relationship quiet. This is all slang. Now you know. If you see these messages, then, hopefully not with your babies, but it can happen. Maybe it might be coming from someone else. 143, I love you, to 1174, to just an underline G. Parents are in the watching. So here's some slang emojis. So if you use corn, it rhymes with porn. So you might use the corn cob to ask for the pictures. You can also use that to substitute. So let's say, let's say they're on a site that's screening harmful material. You can use the corn cob, or the peach, or the devil, or the drooling face. Now, I did not know that the multi-meanings of drooly face. I think I've done drooly face when my husband asked me to go out to dinner and we were going to go eat some pasta. But apparently, had anyone younger than 50 saw it, then I probably would have been taken for something else, right? Noodles, nudes, woozy face, like drunkenness, eyes, like looking, sending or receiving messages, right? Someone is looking. Now, if your child or something happens where even pictures of you end up on the internet, there are ways to take it down, especially for children. There's other professional ways for adults, but you can go to NCMEC. It will work with their partners to get down any of the material that perhaps your child has posted. Includes Facegram, Instagram, OnlyFans, Yubo, and Pornhub. Let's talk about how trafficking, human trafficking looks, and then I'm going to finish up and take your questions. Tired of working that minimum wage job, right? This is an advertisement to traffic children, people. This is what they look for. Now, Bark has parental controls. If you're not using parental controls, age-appropriate parental controls for your teens and young people, then I would suggest you do. And I think if my children were young, I would say it's not you, it's the world. I trust you because that reinforces that you do trust them. There isn't anything they can do that is going to so disappoint you that their lives should be over, right? But this is just like you're going to wear a seatbelt. Just pretend mama is in the car with you, right? So you can get a Bark. Now, it monitors screen time and content and filters websites. It can also set location alerts. It is subscription, but it's graduated. So you may not need location alerts, but you do need to monitor the content or limit the screen time. There are other parental controls. You can look these up and kind of pick what you think you may need. Some of them are free, but they don't really do a whole lot. But you've got Quasudio, Kid Logger. That does keystrokes, so you can kind of see what your kid's been typing if they delete it. There's another key logger, and that can be monitored remotely. And then you've got Safe Kids. So that is a software that enables you to kind of put parameters on any of their devices. And that is a picture of my Instagram star and his brother, Dobby. I am showing you that picture to let you know the world is okay. It's been a lot of icky stuff today, and I am sorry. I'm always the one that has to come and talk about icky stuff, so I'm going to show you a dog and a cat. You know? Makes life a little easier. I know that some of you have questions. I'll be happy to answer them publicly or privately. That's entirely up to you all. Does anyone have a question they think everyone would want to know? Answer to? Yes, ma'am.
I wanted you to add to your screen that people put GPSs on your car.
Yes.
And they also leave monitors in your home.
Yes, they do. So she's talking about the fact that people can put GPS tracking systems on your car. And some, depends on the relationship or how they get their monitors in your home. Right now, you are on a public roadway. Okay? And so tracking devices like that are just kind of like private investigators. And it is legal. What is rolling through the legislature right now is a bill to say that will become illegal. If it is for harassing nature or a sort of stalking, so let's say we're at a very contentious divorce and I am doing that, right, that would become illegal. One of the ways that we can make our laws better, safer, and more useful to us that work them is to vote. I hate to use the church to be political, and I'm not. I'm just saying that if you don't like some of these things or you think they should be stronger or not so strong, talk to your legislators and vote. I tell victims that when they come to me and say, Miss Helix, I want them under the jail. And I'm like, I can't put them under the jail, baby. That's not a punishment. This is only a misdemeanor. What they did to you is only a misdemeanor. I can only maybe get them there for a year. And they get sad and they ask what they can do, and I just tell them to vote. To vote and make sure that your representative knows what you want and what you think is appropriate for your community. So I encourage you to do that. It's the only way we can make that change. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Why do you think all this gun violence, what is the main reason for it?
Go back one more time, I didn't hear you.
What is the main reason for all this gun violence?
What is the main reason for all this gun? Well, I can tell you that in Jefferson County, of the 124 known offenders, 74% of them have a history of domestic violence. And I know that because I am on the team that is hand counting all of those gun deaths. Access to weapons is my opinion. And if you have access to a weapon, that your brain is working fully and functionally in order to possess that weapon. But I do think it is the type of people who own weapons. We do not in the state of Alabama have an extreme risk protection order. Extreme risk protection order would be somebody that we know to be unhealthy, someone that we know to might be suffering, or someone who maybe is threatening harm. That is one mechanism to help keep weapons out of people's hands who may not need them at the time. But gun violence, goodness, it's so multifaceted, but those are the two things that come to mind for me. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make an observation. Some of the things that you're talking about, I'm a community president, and I see it all. And with the gun violence, like you were saying, a lot of that's sometimes just self-medication. You know, they don't have to really have a reason. I just had someone that was killed in my neighborhood guilty. You know, they got to argue, got outside, and next thing they knew, the young man was shot. And it was 20 rounds. So that gun in that person's hand at that time, what he was taking, you know, it's too easy to get.
I think it is, and I don't know if we have a generation of folks that are just quick for impulsivity, right? Instant gratification. Not that that's what I mean, but that instantaneous, let's solve this, let's do this. Now's the right time to do it. My husband and I were held at gunpoint when we lived in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And I ran, and he stayed outside with them. And to this day, that one instant changed everything about how I felt about guns. I think about it a lot. It changed my life. He said, it's over. We're all okay. We're good, right? But there's never been a gun in my house when my children were growing up. I do own a gun now just by virtue of what I do, but I think people should be trained, right? Conflict resolution, is that even a course that we teach anymore in schools, or do they get it in college? I don't think so. So I think maybe just doing a better job of that will hopefully not just resort to that. Well, I'll just take care of it right now. This is instant. Yeah, I agree. It is a problem. Yes, ma'am.
I don't think I saw you talk about when you were talking about the social media.
TikTok. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, and you can just lump it all up in there. TikTok as well. I don't really understand the whole who's getting our information. I'm not really sure. I'm not very educated about that. But anytime anyone that you don't know can contact your child without you knowing is a problem. Bottom line. You should know who your children's teachers are. You should know who they're hanging out with, who's in their home. I think that's just normal for us. But somehow, and I think it's some parents, not all, they're quiet. Been able to clean my house. Okay, that's me maybe. They're quiet, they're in their room, they're safe because they're in my home, right? That's what we sort of grew up believing, if I can lay eyes on them. But it's just not the case anymore. It's just not anymore. Not at all. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
You know, this seems like it's invading our privacy, but you know, on your computer, when you turn your computer on, you know, at the very bottom of your computer is a red light. And when you turn it on, it seems like the red light, they have it on, it's off. But when you turn it, when you have it on, when you turn it on, it's red. To me, that red light, I've heard this, that red light still is active when it's off.
I don't know. I would think that once power's been disconnected, it's off. I would think so. But I will tell you a thing that I don't think many of us probably realized, and I know I didn't until COVID, was when I search something, and I'm in the house with my spouse, and they get on and search, they know what I searched. So if I'm a domestic violence victim, or I'm someone that needs help, and I Google, where's my closest shelter. If I'm living with you, you can get on, and once you open up that Google and you start typing, you're going to see my history. So the computer does keep all of that stuff. The internet does. But I'm not sure if you disconnect that power, that really is still going. I don't know. But look into it to make sure. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
So, to give you one more thing to add to it, with more social media, there's a thing called IP law. And I know for the parents out here that are not more familiar with it, that means Discord, Snapchat. When your child tends to log on to it, your IP from whether it's your phone or your router, it goes to the company. But what they don't tell you is that you can actually pull somebody's IP from it. So I believe that should be added on
Yes.
there because that is something that is frequently wrong. And as an IT STEM person, I do this for my family as well. I have a younger sister. And so one of the few things I would recommend in the future would be to mask your router or your IP. And so your internet provider can do that for you. But I believe that is something that needs to be present.
And for those who don't understand, your IP is like your virtual address.
Yes, ma'am.
Would that be a good way to explain it?
Yes, ma'am.
It's sort of your virtual address. The IP address you can gather different types of information from.
With your IP, you can gather basically who you are, where you live, your social security, your address of your house. If you have multiple cars, they can pull your car. They can pull basically anything from your IP just from the fact of where you are or who you provide with.
So your street name and address, the U.S. Postal Service uses. Is this a good analogy? And your IP address is what your cable provider uses. And so when we send messages out into the world, just like when we send mail, we put a return address on there. Your IP address is sort of like your return address. They know. Is that good?
A better way to look at it is think of your home address and then think of your IP address as the same thing. It shows basically where you are and who you are on the internet. Now,
Yeah.
with it, that is not to fearmonger and to make everybody freak out. Because I can say the same thing to my mom. But there are ways to keep it safe, and the thing about it is they are evolving with the IP to protect us with it. And so as a STEM person, I do see that evolving each time we do have, major incidents across whether it be governmental or just simple, police officer affairs. That does evolve.
And I think when you have bad actors, maybe your child is already kind of interfaced with, you have to go to these more extreme measures, right? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So just to kind of like piggyback off of him, so if you go to Google, which it kind of freaked me out, I put my name in, and it gave my entire address,
Oh, yeah.
my correct address, my phone number, my correct phone number. So my question is, how do I remove myself from being searchable to that degree?
So to answer that one, you can't.
You can't. It's all public.
But the problem with it is, and I have to explain this once again to my mom. Say, for example, you have an Amazon account. When you go and you purchase something from Amazon, you have third parties that are within it. And they basically pick up whatever it is you're looking at, and then they spread. And once it keeps spreading, it keeps spreading, it keeps spreading. And so basically you can reverse search yourself, but you will endlessly pick up because they'll figure out who you are, what your address is, what your name is. The only thing that they may not be able to show up, and correct me if I'm wrong, would be your social security number and then a couple other things that are more private. But as long as you're using, major sites, they'll always pull information and they'll always share it whether you want them to or not. That's just how money is made. That's how they make their money.
If you own a home, your stuff is at the courthouse. I can go look it up. And for a while, if you all lawyers recall, remember our court got in trouble because they were putting, and still do at times, have social security numbers up there. Sometimes you can find people's social security numbers. And I believe they were sued for it due to that. Scary. Yes, ma'am.
I have a neighbor that was using my water, washing cars and clothes.
Yeah?
And I was
probably have to call your water company. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think nowadays you'll have just to keep a close look at your bills. I think before we were pretty trusting, you know, about, well, I must have used, you know, $65 worth of water, right? And I think now we have to be very careful if any of us have a digital footprint, which is pretty much everyone in this room. We just have to be really careful about our credit cards, even the bills, even from our government and certain services that we purchase from.
Well, what I did is I put a lock on my water.
Well, there you go. Well, you will be the educator on that for anyone else. She got it all figured out.
Let me say this while we appreciate all the questions. This is a sexual violence and internet thing. So if you have some questions specific about that for Ms. Helix, let's ask those questions, not these other questions that she's not here to talk about. Okay? You can talk about those some other time. But if you got something about the sexual violence and the dangers of the internet for your children, those are the questions that we want to address to her. So let's just kind of keep it to that.
Now, I will be happy to stick around if you want to talk to me privately or have an issue about one of these subjects, because I am not an expert in other things. I am not. I don't know anything about theft. Don't know nothing at all about theft or drugs or DUIs. Nope, don't know it. But if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to stick around for you and answer them until everyone's questions are answered. Okay? Thank you all very much for allowing me. This is my law professor right here.
Well, we won't hold that against you. That's it. Don't get us started on that, man. Okay, thank you so much again, Ms. Helix. We appreciate it so very, very much. So at this time, I think we're going to have lunch. Who's going? We need someone to give us directions as to how we're going to do the lunch. Anybody from our committees, or what are we supposed to do? So what are we supposed to tell the people? Go to the kitchen? Are they going to come in and sit, or they pick up a bag? What's the deal? Okay. All right. Everybody, like you said, Ms. Helix, you know, you got to have a leader. If you ask anybody, nobody says anything. So anyway. All right, so I understand that we do have lunch. It's a pick up and go. So just go by the multi-purpose room and pick up your bags. We appreciate everyone coming, and we thank you so very much for your attendance. At this time, we are going to, if we don't have any announcements from our minister or anything, we'll have a dismissal prayer. We'll pray for the food, and we'll be dismissed. Let us pray. Father God, again, we thank you for your many blessings, and we thank you for this opportunity to be engaged in this learning session today. We again thank you for Attorney Helix for coming and spending her time and sharing her expertise with us. And we do pray, God, that you will be with her and her husband as they travel back to their home and provide them safe travels. Bless the food that we are about to receive. May it nourish and strengthen our bodies and protect all of us, God, as we leave this place, headed to our final destination. It is in Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.